Picture this: a stunning mid-century mansion built by a legend, torn apart by greed and secrets. Cracks in the foundation. I've been tending gardens in Beverly Hills for years, working for folks who've got more money than they know what to do with. Mansions like these, they're more than just houses. They're stories carved in stone and wood, each one holding secrets in its walls. I keep my head down, clip the hedges, and listen. People talk when they think you're just the help. They forget a gardener's got ears. But this one story about the Frederick estate, it's stuck with me. It's a tale of loyalty, betrayal, and a house that's more than just a home. I was there for every step of it, and I'm still not sure if I was just a witness or something more. The Frederick estate sits on a quiet hill, all glass and mid-century lines, with a view of Los Angeles that could make you forget the chaos below. Frederick, the man who built it, was a legend in the construction world. He didn't just put up buildings, he crafted legacies. His daughter, Jada, inherited his knack for architecture and his love for this house. It's got his touch in every detail. The hand-carved walnut panels in the dining room, the custom-built workshop in the back where he taught Jada to sand wood when she was a kid. I'd see her out there sometimes, running her fingers over the tools like they were holy relics. She's 35 now, sharp as a tack, but there's a weight in her eyes, like she's carrying her dad's ghost. Frederick passed a couple years back, heart attack, quick and brutal. Left Jada the estate in a will so airtight you'd think he knew what was coming. His widow, Kaylee, didn't take it well. She was a beauty in her day, a socialite who threw parties that made the papers, but losing Frederick broke something in her. 6 months after the funeral, she showed up with Ethan, a slick-talking businessman with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He's 58, all charm and tailored suits, but I've seen his type before, guys who'd sell their own kids for a deal. Ethan brought his 2 grown kids, Lily and George, into the house like they owned it. That's when things started to shift. I was pruning the rose bushes near the patio one morning when I first noticed the changes. Lily, 32, a designer with a chip on her shoulder, was barking orders at a contractor. "Rip out those old panels," she said, pointing at the walnut Frederick had spent months carving. "We're going modern, open concept, clean lines." The contractor hesitated, but Lily waved him off. "This place is a museum. Time to bring it into this century." I kept my head down, but I could feel Frederick turning in his grave. That wood wasn't just decor, it was his signature, his pride. Jada wasn't around, she was off at her architecture firm, buried in blueprints, but I knew she'd hate this. George, Ethan's son, was worse in his own way. He's 30, all ambition and no patience, the kind of guy who thinks he's one app away from being the next Elon Musk. He took over Frederick's workshop, turning it into a mess of laptops and 3D printers for his startup. I caught him tossing out Frederick's old tools one day, chucking them into a dumpster like they were junk. "This stuff's ancient," he said when he saw me watching. "We need space for innovation." I didn't say nothing, just kept raking. But I remembered Frederick showing me those tools years ago, explaining how each one had a purpose, a story. "A good craftsman respects his tools," he'd said. George didn't respect nothing. Kaylee was the one who surprised me most. She used to spend hours in the garden with Frederick, tending the roses he'd planted for her. Now she was letting Ethan run the show. I'd see her with him on the patio, laughing at his stories, her eyes bright in a way they hadn't been since Frederick died. She started dressing different, flashier, younger, like she was trying to erase the years she'd spent with her husband. One day, as I was mulching the flower beds, she came out and said, "It's time for a fresh start, don't you think?" I just nodded, but I saw the way she avoided looking at the roses. It was like she was burying Frederick all over again. Jada came by on weekends, usually with her 4-year-old daughter, Olivia, trailing behind her. Olivia's a spitfire, always tugging at my sleeve, asking why the flowers smell like candy. Jada would smile, but it never reached her eyes. She'd walk through the house, touching the walls like she was checking for a pulse. One Sunday, she caught Lily's contractors tearing out a built-in bookshelf Frederick had made for her when she was a kid. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight. Lily shrugged, all casual. "Just updating the vibe. You'll thank me when it's done." Jada's jaw clenched, but she didn't say anything. She just took Olivia's hand and left. I could tell she was holding back a storm. I started talking to Jada more after that. She'd find me in the garden, asking about the roses or the irrigation system, but I knew she just needed someone to listen. Dad built this place with his hands, she told me once, her voice low. Every corner, every detail, it's him. I can't let it go. I nodded, thinking of Frederick's words. A house is the soul of a family. You don't just tear it down. I didn't tell her that, not yet. But I did tell her to check the workshop. Your dad kept everything documented, I said. Might be worth a look. She took my advice. A few days later, she found Frederick's will in a locked drawer, along with a set of old blueprints for the house. The will was clear, the estate was Jada's, no question, with a letter from Frederick urging her to preserve this home for the future. The blueprints were stranger, covered in his handwriting, with a cryptic note. The truth is in the walls, Jada showed me, her brow furrowed. What does this mean? She asked. I didn't know, but I'd seen enough in my time to suspect Frederick had left something behind, something he didn't trust to just anyone. Things got worse when Ethan started talking about selling off part of the land. I overheard him one evening on the phone near the pool house, his voice low but sharp. We'll carve out the back acre, he said. The developers are ready to pay big. I froze, clippers in hand, as he mentioned a name, some big shot builder with a rap sheet longer than my arm. Ethan was playing a dangerous game, and I didn't like the look of it. When I told Jada, her face went pale. He can't do that, she said. Dad would never allow it. She pulled out the will again, reading it like a lifeline. That's when she started to fight back. Kaylee didn't take kindly to Jada's pushback. I was trimming the hedges when I heard them arguing on the patio. You're being selfish, Jada, Kaylee snapped. Ethan's trying to make this place better for all of us. Why can't you let go of the past? Jada's voice shook as she replied, because it's Dad's past. It's our past. Kaylee just waved her off like she was dismissing a child. I could see the hurt in Jada's eyes, but there was something else too. Resolve, like she was finally waking up. That same week, I found something in the garden. Buried under the rose bushes where Frederick used to sit with Kaylee was a small metal box. Inside was a key and a note in Frederick's handwriting. For the workshop. Keep it safe. I didn't know what it unlocked, but I knew it wasn't nothing. Frederick was meticulous, the kind of man who planned 3 steps ahead. I slipped the key into my pocket and kept working, waiting for the right moment to tell Jada. Something told me this house was about to spill its secrets, and I wasn't sure any of us were ready for what they'd reveal. The next day, Ethan's daughter, Lily, started tearing out the rose garden itself. It's too old-fashioned, she said to the landscaper she'd hired, not even glancing at me. We're putting in a Zen rock thing. I stood there, watching them rip out the roots Frederick had planted, and I thought about that key in my pocket. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about what happens when you let greed and ambition tear up something sacred. I'd seen it before, in other mansions, other families, but this time, it felt personal. Frederick had trusted me to keep his garden alive, and I wasn't about to let him down. Jada came by that evening, Olivia in tow. She saw the torn-up garden and stopped dead. They didn't even ask, she whispered, more to herself than to me. Olivia tugged at her hand, asking why the flowers were gone. Jada didn't answer, just stared at the churned-up dirt. I handed her a glass of water and said, your dad left something for you. Check the workshop again. There's more to this place than they know. She looked at me, eyes searching, and nodded. I didn't tell her about the key yet. Some things you've got to let people find for themselves. That night, as I locked up the tool shed, I heard Ethan on the phone again, this time with Piper, Kaylee's friend from some charity board. She's digging too deep, Ethan said, his voice tight. We need to move faster. Piper's voice was sharp, even through the phone. Handle it, Ethan. We're too close to lose this now. I didn't know what they were planning, but I knew it wasn't good. I'd seen men like Ethan in the service, guys who'd burn everything down for a payday, and I'd seen women like Jada fighting to hold on to what matters. The question was, how far would each of them go? I kept working, kept watching. The roses were gone, but the house was still standing. For now, shattered bonds. The Frederick estate was starting to look like a battlefield, and I was still just the gardener, clipping hedges and keeping my eyes open. But you don't spend years as a Marine without learning how to read a war zone. Jada was fighting for her father's legacy, and Ethan was digging in like a man with something to hide. The air around the house felt heavy, like a storm was brewing, and I wasn't sure who'd get caught in the rain. Jada had been spending more time at the estate, poking around the workshop after I'd nudged her to look deeper. She'd found Frederick's blueprints, the ones with that cryptic note. The truth is in the walls. She showed them to me one afternoon while I was mulching the new flower beds, replacements for the roses Lily had ripped out. Dad wasn't just talking about the house, was he? She asked, her voice low, like she was afraid the walls themselves might hear. I shrugged, brushing dirt off my hands. Your dad was a planner. If he left a clue, it's there for a reason. She nodded, but her eyes were distant, like she was piecing together a puzzle only she could see. Ethan was moving fast, too fast. I'd caught him twice now, meeting with a guy in a black SUV at the edge of the property. The guy looked like trouble, expensive suit, cheap morals. I didn't need to hear their conversation to know Ethan was in deep with someone shady. Piper Cayley's friend from the charity board was in on it too. I overheard her one evening whispering to Ethan by the pool house. The developers are getting antsy, she said. We need that land deal locked in before she figures it out. Ethan just grunted, but his eyes flicked toward the house, where Jada was inside with Olivia. I kept my head down, trimming the bougainvillea, but my gut told me this was bigger than a real estate flip. Cayley was changing, and not for the better. She'd stopped coming out to the garden altogether, like she couldn't face the ghost of Frederick's roses. Instead, she was glued to Ethan's side, parroting his talk about modernizing the estate. One day, while I was fixing the irrigation system, she came out in a flashy new dress, all sequins and no soul. We're hosting a gala here next month, she said, not really looking at me. Ethan says it'll put this place on the map. I nodded, but I thought about Frederick, how he built this house for family, not for show. Cayley didn't seem to care anymore. Lily and George were making their own marks. Lily had contractors tearing out more of Frederick's work. Those walnut panels were gone, replaced with sleek white walls that looked like they belonged in a tech startup. George was worse, treating the workshop like his personal playground. I found him one morning tossing out Frederick's old sketchbooks to make room for a 3D printer. This place is a gold mine, he said, grinning like he'd cracked the code to riches. Dad's got plans for it. I didn't say anything, just swept up the sawdust. But I noticed a locked cabinet in the corner of the workshop, one I hadn't seen Frederick open in years. The key I'd found under the roses was burning a hole in my pocket. Jada was starting to push back, but it wasn't easy. She'd confronted Ethan about the land deal, and he'd laughed it off, calling it just business. Cayley backed him up, her voice sharp. You're so stuck on your father's memory, Jada, she said. This house needs to live, not be a shrine. I was nearby, weeding the flower beds, and I saw Jada's face, hurt but hardening. She didn't argue, just walked away, clutching those blueprints. Later, she found me by the shed. They're not telling me everything, she said. Dad's will says, I own this place outright, but Ethan's acting like it's his. I told her to talk to Henry, her dad's lawyer. And keep those blueprints close, I added. They're more than just paper. Mia, Jada's best friend and business partner, was another piece of the puzzle. She'd been coming around more, all supportive smiles, but something was off. I caught her one evening, slipping out of Ethan's study when she thought no one was looking. She froze when she saw me, then laughed it off. Just grabbing some files for Jada, she said, but her hands were empty. I didn't trust her. I'd seen too many folks in this town play nice while sharpening knives behind their backs. Mia was Jada's rock, but even rocks can crack under pressure. The real trouble started when Jada found a hidden panel in the workshop behind that locked cabinet. I'd given her the key I'd found, and she'd waited until Ethan and Cayley were out to open it. Inside was a small safe, and inside that, a folder with documents, contracts, emails, names. Frederick had been digging into a corrupt construction ring before he died, one tied to the same developers Ethan was cozying up to. There was a note in his handwriting, protect the house. It's the key. Jada showed me, her hands shaking. Dad knew something, she said. Dad knew something, she said. He was trying to stop them. I didn't say much, just told her to keep it quiet and talk to Henry. But I knew this was trouble, the kind that gets people hurt. Ethan must have sensed Jada was onto him, because he doubled down. One night, he cornered her in the living room, all smiles but with an edge in his voice. We've put a lot into this house, Jada, he said. It's only fair we get our names on the deed. I was outside cleaning the fountain close enough to hear through the open window. Jada didn't back down. Dad left it to me for a reason, she said, and you're not touching it. Ethan's face darkened, and Cayley jumped in, her voice shrill. You're tearing this family apart, Jada. Ethan's just trying to help. I could see Jada's shoulders tense, but she held her ground. This isn't about family, she said. It's about Dad's legacy. Things escalated from there. Piper started a whisper campaign, spreading word through her charity circles that Jada was a greedy heiress hoarding her father's fortune. Posts started popping up online calling her out for disrespecting Kaylee. Natalie, Kaylee's sister, was stirring the pot too, dropping by to check on Kaylee but really pushing her to side with Ethan. I overheard Natalie one day talking to Kaylee by the pool. "Jada's just jealous," she said. "She can't handle you moving on." I didn't like the way Natalie's eyes darted around, like she was counting the dollars in the estate. Something told me she wasn't just playing family counselor. Jada wasn't alone though. James, her financial advisor, came by one day and laid out the numbers. The estate could bring in serious rental income, enough to secure Olivia's future, but only if it was restored to Frederick's original vision. "You're sitting on a gold mine," James told her. "But you've got to take control." Jada nodded, her jaw set. That's when she made her move. She called a family meeting and laid down the law. Ethan, Kaylee, Lily, and George had 2 weeks to vacate the estate. No more unapproved renovations, no more land deals. "This is my house," she said, her voice steady, "and I'm done letting you tear it apart." The fallout was instant. Kaylee burst into tears, calling Jada heartless. Ethan's charm vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "You're making a big mistake," he said. "We've built a life here," Lily chimed in, clutching her pregnant belly like a shield. "How can you do this to us?" "I'm having a baby." George just smirked, like he knew something Jada didn't. I was sweeping the patio, close enough to see it all through the glass doors. Jada didn't flinch, but I could tell it was killing her. She loved her mom, but she loved her dad's memory more. That night, I found Mia in the garden, pacing like she was spooked. "Everything okay?" I asked, leaning on my rake. She jumped, then forced a smile. "Just stressed about work," she said. But I saw her glance at the house, where Ethan was on the phone again, his voice low and urgent. I didn't push her, but I made a mental note. Mia was hiding something, and in a house like this, secrets don't stay buried long. The next morning, I was clearing debris from the old rose garden when I found another clue, a scrap of paper caught in the roots with Frederick's handwriting. It was a list of names, including the developer Ethan was meeting. I slipped it into my pocket, same as the key. Jada needed to see this, but I had to be careful. Ethan's game was bigger than I'd thought, and I learned in the service that you don't walk into a fight without knowing the terrain. The estate was a powder keg, and someone was about to light the fuse. Ashes of truth. The Frederick estate was a ghost of itself by the time the 2-week deadline hit. The air was thick with tension, like the calm before a firefight. I'd seen enough in my years as a Marine to know when a situation was about to explode, and this one was primed. Jada had drawn a line in the sand, telling Ethan, Kaylee, Lily, and George to get out. They didn't take it lying down. Me, I just kept tending the garden, watching the chaos unfold. But I wasn't just a bystander anymore, not after what I'd found in Frederick's papers. That scrap with the developer's name, tucked away with a key, was burning a hole in my pocket. This wasn't just about a house. It was about a man's legacy, and I'd be damned if I let it crumble. Jada was holding strong, but it was costing her. I saw it in her eyes when she came by with Olivia, who was oblivious to the storm, chasing butterflies in the ruined rose garden. Jada had spent days poring over the documents from the workshop, safe contracts, emails, proof that Frederick had been investigating a corrupt construction ring tied to Ethan's developer friends. The note he'd left, "Protect the house. It's the key," wasn't just about sentiment. Frederick had known something dirty was coming, and he'd trusted Jada to stop it. She showed me the papers one evening, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "Dad was onto them," she said. "He died before he could finish it." I nodded, thinking of the man who'd built this place. Frederick never did anything halfway. Ethan wasn't backing off. He'd gone from charming to menacing, his true colors bleeding through. I overheard him on the phone one night, pacing by the pool house. "She's got nothing," he snapped. "We stick to the plan." Piper, that charity board shark, was egging him on, her voice sharp through the speaker. "If she keeps digging, we're screwed. Shut it down, Ethan." I kept my head down, pruning the jasmine, but my blood was boiling. I'd seen guys like Ethan before, smooth talkers who'd sell their own souls for $1. And Piper? She was no better, playing the saint while pulling strings. Kaylee was the hardest to watch. She'd been Frederick's rock, but now she was Ethan's shadow, clinging to him like he was her lifeline. She'd call Jada daily, her voice swinging between sobs and screams. "You're throwing us out like garbage," she'd cry, or "How can you do this to your own mother?" I was nearby one day, fixing a sprinkler, when Kaylee cornered Jada on the patio. "Ethan's made this place a home again," she said, tears streaming. "You're tearing our family apart." Jada's face was stone, but I saw her flinch. "This isn't about family, Mom," she said. "It's about what Dad wanted." Kaylee stormed off, and I caught Jada wiping her eyes when she thought no one was looking. Lily and George were piling on too. Lily, with her pregnant belly front and center, was turning the house into a showroom for her design portfolio, ripping out Frederick's handcrafted trim for cheap vinyl. George had turned the workshop into a tech bro's wet dream, cables and monitors everywhere. I found him tossing out more of Frederick's sketchbooks one morning, muttering about clearing space for progress. I grabbed one before it hit the dumpster, tucking it under my shirt. It had notes in Frederick's handwriting, sketches of the house with circled spots on the walls. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew they mattered. Mia was the wild card. Jada trusted her, leaned on her, but I'd seen Mia slip out of Ethan's study too many times. One night, I caught her in the garden, texting furiously. When she saw me, she shoved her phone in her pocket and flashed that fake smile. "Just checking on Jada's projects," she said. I didn't buy it. I'd learned in the service to trust my gut, and mine was screaming that Mia was playing both sides. I didn't tell Jada yet. She had enough on her plate, but I kept the sketchbook and the key close. The breaking point came 3 days before the deadline. Piper had organized what she called an intervention on the estate's front lawn. It was a circus. Kaylee's church friends, Natalie, even some of Frederick's old business contacts, all gathered to guilt Jada into backing down. Lily stood there, cradling her belly, talking about how stress could hurt the baby. Kaylee was sobbing, saying Jada was killing her happiness. Natalie chimed in, all crocodile tears, about family loyalty. Piper took the lead, preaching about community values while throwing Jada under the bus. I was trimming the hedges nearby, close enough to hear every word. The crowd was eating it up, glaring at Jada like she was the villain in their soap opera. Jada stood her ground, but I could see it was tearing her apart. Then Piper pushed too far, saying, "Your father would be ashamed of you." That's when I'd had enough. I stepped forward, holding up the sketchbook I'd saved. "Frederick wasn't just building a house," I said, my voice carrying over the crowd. "He was building a legacy, and he left it to Jada for a reason." I handed her the book, open to a sketch with Frederick's note. "The truth is in the walls." Jada's eyes widened, and she ran inside, the crowd murmuring behind her. She found it in the dining room, a false panel behind the crown molding Frederick had milled himself. Inside was a second safe, and the key I'd given her fit perfectly. The documents inside were dynamite, proof that Ethan's developer friends had been bribing officials to rezone land, including the estate's back acre. Frederick had been gathering evidence, planning to blow the whistle before he died. Jada held up the papers, her voice shaking with fury. "This is what Dad was protecting," she said. "And you, Ethan, were part of it." The crowd went silent. Ethan's face turned gray, but he tried to laugh it off. "That's nonsense," he said. "You're grasping at straws." But Isaac, Frederick's old contractor, stepped forward. "I worked with your dad," he said. "Those changes you made, Ethan, they tanked the house's value, and I'd bet my last dollar you knew it." The murmurs grew louder, and I saw doubt creep into the crowd's eyes. Then came the gut punch. Mia, who'd been quiet, stepped forward, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, Jada," she said. "I got in too deep. Ethan offered me a cut if I helped him push the deal." Jada froze, betrayal cutting through her like a knife. "You?" she whispered. Mia nodded, sobbing. "I thought it was just business. I didn't know about the corruption." The crowd was stunned, and Kaylee looked like she'd been slapped. Natalie, cornered, admitted she'd pushed Kaylee to side with Ethan for a piece of the profits. Kaylee collapsed, fainting right there on the lawn. The group scattered after that, some muttering apologies, others slinking away in shame. Jada didn't move, just stared at the papers in her hands. I stayed back, giving her space. She'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. The morning of the deadline, I showed up with Henry, the lawyer, and a locksmith. Ethan, Lily, and George were gone, their stuff packed into a truck. Kaylee stood by the gate, her eyes red but dry. She handed Jada a letter, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know," she said. "I'm sorry." Jada took it but didn't open it. Ethan couldn't resist a final jab as he helped Lily into the truck. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "This isn't over." I didn't answer, neither did Jada. We both knew Frederick had planned for this. The house was a wreck, cheap fixtures where Frederick's craftsmanship used to be, the workshop a mess of George's junk. I walked through it with Jada, pointing out what could be saved. Isaac was already on board, ready to help restore the place. Henry sent the documents to the authorities, and word was Ethan's developer buddies were facing an investigation. Jada decided to turn the estate into a museum for Frederick's work, a way to keep his legacy alive. But James, her financial advisor, dropped a bombshell. The land under the house sat on a small oil deposit, something Frederick had known but kept quiet. It was a new kind of trouble, one that could bring more sharks circling. Later, as I raked the garden, I found an old photo buried in the dirt, a young Frederick in a Marine uniform, standing next to a guy who looked a lot like me, back when I had less gray in my hair. I hadn't told Jada about my time with her dad, how he'd trusted me to keep an eye on this place. Maybe I never would. I looked at Olivia, playing in the grass, and thought about what Frederick used to say, truth sets you free, but it costs you everything. Jada had paid that price. I wondered if I would too. Thanks so much for watching. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments mean the world, and keep these stories coming.